The first snow fell sideways, sharp as whispers, the night Lola decided she would not freeze to death. It wasn't a brave thought, it wasn't even a hopeful one. It was simply a line she drew in the cold, not tonight. She crouched beneath a bramble-thorned hedgerow at the edge of the village, her thin gray tail wrapped tightly around her paws, ears flicking as the wind rattled through bare branches. Snow dusted her whiskers. Her breath came out in small, trembling clouds. Somewhere nearby, a door slammed, light flared, then vanished again, and the village returned to its winter hush. Chimneys sighing, shutters creaking, the distant toll of a church bell counting the hours no one was awake to hear. Lola lifted her head. Warmth existed here, she could smell it. Wood smoke, old bread, something faintly sweet, apples perhaps shriveling in a bowl. She slipped from the hedgerow like a shadow, learning how to move again. Across the lane stood a cottage that leaned slightly to one side, as though it had grown tired of standing straight. Its windows glowed amber behind curtains embroidered with tiny flowers. Snow clung to the thatched roof in uneven drifts. Icicles hung from the eaves like glass teeth. And beneath the back porch, half hidden by stacked firewood and a crooked stone step, was darkness that did not bite quite so hard. Lola padded toward it, each step careful, her paws aching with cold. She had learned caution the hard way, learned that human places could mean comfort or cruelty, sometimes both in the same breath. But the wind shoved her forward and hunger hollowed her belly, and so she chose the risk. She did not see the other cat at first. Kira had already claimed the space. Kira lay curled beneath the porch, a small calico knot of white, rust, and black, eyes half-lidded but alert. One ear bore a nick, old and clean. Her fur was fluffed to twice its size, a living shield against the cold. She smelled like frost and smoke and something stubbornly alive. When Lola's paw crunched softly on snow, Kira's eyes snapped open. They stared at each other. The moment stretched, two strays measuring the cost of sharing warmth when warmth was survival itself. Lola did not hiss. She did not arch her back. She simply sat and tucked her paws beneath her chest, making herself smaller, less threatening, though every instinct screamed at her to be ready to run. Kira's tail flicked once. Then slowly, deliberately, she shifted an inch to the side. It was not an invitation. It was not kindness. It was a truce. Lola exhaled and slipped beneath the porch, the wind fatting behind her like a door gently closed. The earth there was cold but dry. The firewood blocked the worst of the drafts. Heat seeped faintly through the stones from the cottage above, a ghost of warmth but enough. They did not touch. Not at first. Snow fell harder. The night deepened. Somewhere inside the cottage a kettle sang briefly, then went quiet. The smell of tea drifted down through the cracks in the boards. Minutes passed, or hours. Time softened, blurred by cold and exhaustion. Finally, without looking at her, Kira inched closer until their sides brushed. Lola froze. Then Kira settled, solid and warm, her ribs rising and falling in a steady rhythm that said, "I am still here." Lola let herself lean into it, just a fraction, and felt heat bloom along her flank like a memory she hadn't known she was missing. They slept that way, two stray cats beneath a crooked porch, sharing breath, sharing silence, sharing a night neither had been sure she would survive. By morning, the world was transformed. Snow blanketed the village in impossible white. Fence posts wore soft caps. The lane disappeared beneath smooth, untouched drifts. The cottage looked like something from a storybook, smoke curling lazily from the chimney, wreath on the door dusted with frost. Kira woke first. She stretched carefully, mindful of the weight against her side. Lola stirred but did not pull away. Her paws twitched in dreams, chasing something warm and far away. Kira watched her for a long moment. She had lived alone a long time, long enough to forget the shape of company, the simple language of shared warmth, long enough to believe she preferred it that way. Yet here was Lola, thin, wary, stubborn enough to choose life on a night that tried to take it. Kira stood, slipped out from under the porch, and padded toward the kitchen door. She sat and waited. Inside, the cottage creaked awake. Footsteps crossed the floor. A cupboard opened. A sigh, human, tired, gentle, floated through the wood. The door opened a crack. Kira lifted her chin. Lola, blinking awake beneath the porch, watched snowlight spill across the ground and felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not hunger, not fear. Possibility. And as the door opened wider and a startled gasp gave way to a soft laugh, Lola took her first step out of the shadows, unaware that this was only the beginning, that winter had far more to offer them than cold, and that some shelters, once found, changed the shape of a life forever. The human did not reach for them right away. That, Lola would later understand, mattered more than the bowl of food that followed. The woman, wrapped in a thick wool cardigan the color of dried moss, hair loosely braided down one shoulder, stood very still in the doorway. Steam from her mug curled into the cold air. Her eyes moved from Kira to Lola, then softened, as though she had stumbled upon something delicate and sacred. "Well," she murmured, voice low and careful like snow settling on branches, "aren't you a pair?" Kira did not flinch. She had learned over many winters the difference between a hand that chased and a hand that offered. This one did neither. It simply hovered, uncertain, before retreating back inside. The door closed, but not all the way. A minute later, it opened again. A shallow ceramic bowl appeared on the step, set down gently, as though the ground itself might bruise if treated roughly. The scent of warm porridge mixed with fish drifted out, rich and unmistakable. Lola's stomach clenched so hard she nearly cried. Kira glanced back at her once, tail flicking. Not a command, not a warning, just a fact. "I am going to eat." She approached first, every movement calm and unhurried. Lola waited, muscles coiled, heart hammering. She had been fooled before by generosity that vanished the moment she stepped too close, but nothing happened. The woman retreated again, leaving the door ajar, the warmth inside glowing like a held breath. When Kira began to eat, Lola crept forward, paws sinking into the snow, and joined her. They ate in silence, flakes landing on their backs, melting into their fur. Lola ate too fast, then slowed herself, remembering how hunger could turn against you if you weren't careful. The food filled her, spread warmth through her limbs, made the world feel less sharp. Afterward, neither of them left. The porch became theirs that day. The woman, whose name they would learn much later was Elspeth, laid out an old wool blanket folded twice and tucked beneath the porch where the stones held heat. She left another bowl of water that did not freeze, changed morning and night. She spoke to them softly but never tried to touch them. She let them decide the shape of things. Snowstorms came and went. The village grew quieter, wrapped deep in winter. Icicles lengthened, days shortened. Nights pooled thick and blue around the cottage. Lola learned the sounds of this place. The way the kettle sang slightly off-key, the creak of the third stair, the wind that whistled through the apple tree behind the shed, the particular hush that fell just before dawn when even the snow seemed to be listening. Kira taught her the rules. Which fences were safe, which dogs barked worse than they bit, where the sun fell warmest on clear afternoons, how to tell when the woman was sad, her steps slower, her humming gone, and when she was content, moving through the cottage like someone setting things gently back where they belonged. They hunted together sometimes, though food was no longer scarce. Mice under the hedges. A careless sparrow once when winter had dulled its instincts. Lola was quick, all sharp angles and sudden bursts. Kira was patient, her stillness a kind of gravity. At night they curled together beneath the porch, the blanket smelling of sheep and smoke and home-adjacent things. Lola dreamed more deeply than she ever had, not of running, not of hunger, but of warmth that did not disappear when she woke. One evening, as dusk bled purple into the snow, something changed. Lola felt it first, a tension in the air, a wrongness that made her ears flatten and her spine prickle. Kira sensed it a heartbeat later, rising to her feet, eyes fixed on the lane. Footsteps. Not Elspeth's careful tread. These were heavy, uneven, accompanied by laughter that cracked too loudly against the quiet. A group of humans came stumbling down the road, boots crunching, voices spilling. One kicked at a snowbank. Another threw something. Lola never saw what into the hedge, where it landed with a wet thud. Kira moved instantly, stepping in front of Lola, her body low and solid, a shield. Lola's breath caught. Old memories surged, shouting stones, hands that grabbed. The group passed the cottage, shadows stretching long across the snow. One of them glanced toward the porch. "Cats," he scoffed, "filthy things." Kira did not move. Lola pressed close behind her, heart pounding so hard she feared it might betray them. The cottage door opened. Elspeth stepped out, shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. She did not raise her voice. She did not shout or threaten. She simply stood there, small but unyielding, a presence that altered the shape of the moment. "Go on," she said, calm as frost. "You're done here." There was a pause, a muttered curse. Then the footsteps retreated, laughter fading into the dark. Elspeth waited until the lane was empty before she knelt by the porch. "You're safe," she whispered, not just to the cats but to the night itself. Something inside Lola loosened then, a knot she hadn't known she carried. She leaned forward without thinking, her nose brushing Elspeth's mittened hand. The woman froze. Then carefully, reverently, she let her fingers rest against Lola's cheek. Kira watched, eyes narrowed, breath steady. The winter deepened after that. Snow piled high enough to reshape the world. The cottage became an island of warmth and light in a sea of white. Lola and Kira learned new territories: the kitchen threshold, the woodpile, the sunlit patch by the south wall. One night, as the wind howled and the roof groaned beneath its icy burden, Lola woke to a sound she had never heard before. Kira was crying. Not loud, just a thin, broken sound pulled from somewhere deep. Lola pressed closer, startled, uncertain. Kira's body trembled, her breath uneven. Lola licked her ear once, then again. Kira stilled. Outside, snow fell endlessly, patient and soft, covering the past inch by inch. And beneath the porch of the crooked cottage, two stray cats clung to each other, unaware that winter was quietly rewriting their story, that the hardest nights were not yet done, and that the choices they made in the cold would echo far beyond the thaw. The crying stopped, but sleep did not come easily after that. Kira lay awake long into the night, eyes open, watching shadows sway beneath the porch as the wind threaded through the village. Lola stayed pressed against her side, breathing slow and deep, a small furnace of borrowed warmth. Each rise and fall of Lola's ribs anchored Kira to the present, to now, instead of the places her thoughts wanted to wander. Kira had not cried since, before the first winter, she survived alone. She did not remember the exact night, only the way grief had once surprised her, sharp and sudden like stepping into icy water. Tonight felt different, softer, sadness without panic, a remembering rather than a wound. By morning, snow had sealed the world again. Elspeth came out with her broom and cleared a careful path from door to woodpile, from step to gate. She hummed as she worked, a tuneless melody that carried comfort the way a hearth carries heat. Kira watched from the porch, ears twitching, cataloging each sound. Lola sat beside her, tail tucked neatly around her feet. "You think she knows we're still here because of her?" Lola asked, not in words, of course, but in the slow blink she offered the woman, in the quiet patience of staying. Kira considered this. Humans were strange creatures, capable of forgetting kindness as easily as cruelty, capable of miracles they never seemed to notice. She knows something, Kira decided. Enough. Days slipped into a rhythm, so gentle it was almost invisible. Elspeth placed 2 bowls now, always 2, side by side. She left the door cracked wider when the wind grew cruel. Once, she set a cardboard box lined with straw near the porch, tucked carefully into a corner where snow could not reach. She pretended not to watch when Kira inspected it thoroughly before stepping inside. Lola followed, wide-eyed, marveling at the way the straw held warmth, how the walls blocked sound. "It's like a nest," she whispered in wonder. Kira said nothing, but that night she slept more deeply than she had in years. Winter pressed on. Ice formed lacework along the windows. The apple tree shed its last stubborn leaves. Nights grew so long they seemed endless, the stars sharp and close enough to touch. Some evenings Lola and Kira ventured farther, exploring the frozen edges of the village, the silent green, the abandoned shed by the stream, the path that led toward the woods where foxes watched with bright, knowing eyes. They always came back. That was new. One afternoon, a storm arrived without warning. The sky darkened abruptly, clouds rolling in low and fast, swallowing light. Snow fell thick and heavy, the kind that muffled sound and erased landmarks in minutes. The wind rose, howling through the lane, turning the world into a spinning blur of white. Lola hesitated at the edge of the green, ears flattened. "I don't like this," she said, unease rippling through her. Kira scanned the horizon. The cottage was no longer visible, just a vague smudge where it should have been. "We should move," Kira said, calm but firm. They pushed forward together, paws sinking, snow clinging to their fur. The storm pressed against them from every side, disorienting, relentless. Lola's heart raced. Shapes shifted. Sounds vanished. Then a shadow loomed ahead. Not the cottage. A fallen fence lay half buried in snow, wood splintered, wire twisted. Lola veered too late. Her paw slipped through a gap, snagging painfully. She yelped, panic flaring. Kira spun back instantly, digging at the snow with fierce precision, freeing Lola's leg. Lola trembled, chest heaving. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't." "Don't," Kira interrupted, pressing her forehead briefly to Lola's. "Stay with me." They huddled against the fence as the storm screamed overhead. Time stretched, warped by cold and fear. Lola's leg throbbed but held. Kira positioned herself to block the worst of the wind, her body a living wall. Just when Lola began to fear they would be swallowed by the storm entirely, a light appeared. Dim, steady. Elspeth. She came through the snow like a lantern made human, coat pulled tight, scarf wrapped high, one gloved hand shielding a small oil lamp. She moved slowly, deliberately, calling softly. Not names, not words, just a sound meant to carry reassurance. Kira lifted her head and answered. Elspeth froze, then hurried toward them, relief breaking across her face. "Oh, there you are," she breathed, kneeling despite the snow soaking through her skirts. She did not touch them, only positioned herself so the wind broke around all three of them. They returned together, the woman setting the pace, shielding them when the gusts grew sharp. The cottage door closed behind them with a finality that felt like safety being sealed in place. Inside, warmth wrapped around Lola like a promise. Elspeth knelt again, inspecting Lola's leg with careful eyes. She spoke softly the whole time, her voice a low murmur that smoothed the rough edges of fear. She brought out a towel warmed by the fire, dried their fur, left them near the hearth without pressing closer. Lola watched the flames dance and felt something settle deep in her bones. That night, for the first time, Lola crossed the threshold fully. She stepped onto the kitchen floor, paused tentative and sat. Elspeth noticed but did not react. She simply smiled, the way one smiles at a sunrise you never try to hold. Kira followed more slowly, pausing at the doorway, weighing the moment. Then she stepped inside as well. Snow continued to fall outside, piling high against the windows. The cottage glowed, a pocket of warmth and quiet in a frozen world. Lola curled near the hearth, Kira beside her, and together they listened to the crackle of firewood and the soft ticking of a clock that measured time gently. Neither of them knew what spring would bring, or whether winter would ask more of them yet. But as the night deepened and the storm raged on, Lola tucked her nose beneath Kira's chin, and Kira let her stay there, knowing, without fully understanding how, that this season was still unfolding, and that the story they were living had only just begun. Winter did not loosen its grip after the storm. If anything, it seemed to settle in more deeply, as though the land itself had decided to rest beneath its white quilt a while longer. Days arrived pale and quiet. Nights stretched luxuriously long, filled with the sigh of wind and the slow ticking of the clock inside the cottage, a sound Lola now associated with safety, with the assurance that time was moving forward instead of waiting to swallow her whole. Lola woke one morning to sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. It startled her at first. She lifted her head, blinking, unsure where she was. Then warmth crept into her awareness, real warmth, steady and kind, and memory followed. The hearth, the wooden chair legs, Kira's familiar weight curled against her back. Kira was awake, watching dust motes drift through the light like tiny, golden insects. "Is it still winter?" Lola asked sleepily. Kira flicked an ear. "Yes, but it's resting." Elspeth moved quietly about the cottage, boots soft against the floor, kettle humming. She paused when she noticed Lola awake, crouched slowly, and set down a small saucer of cream near the hearth. "For courage," she said gently, though Lola would not understand the words, only the intent behind them. Lola hesitated. The boundary between porch and kitchen had once felt vast as an ocean. Now it was only a few careful steps. She rose, tested her leg, it still ached but held and padded forward. She lapped the cream, each swallow a small marvel. Kira watched her with an expression that hovered between pride and watchfulness. "You're changing," Kira observed. Lola considered this, whiskers twitching. "So are you." Kira did not argue. They spent more time inside after that, though always by choice. Some days the door remained open only a crack, and they stayed beneath the porch, listening to the world beyond. Other days, when the cold sharpened its teeth and the sky pressed low, they lingered by the hearth, bodies stretched long, soaking in heat until their fur nearly crackled. Elspeth never tried to hurry them. She read aloud in the evenings, her voice low and rhythmic, filling the cottage with stories older than the village itself. Sometimes she knitted, the soft click of needles weaving comfort stitch by stitch. Other times she simply sat, hands folded, staring into the fire as though listening to memories speak. Lola learned the shape of Elspeth's sadness. It arrived quietly, like frost creeping along glass. On those days, Elspeth's movements slowed. Her humming faded. She stared out the window longer than usual, fingers absently tracing the rim of her mug. Lola, without knowing why, began to sit closer. Not touching, just near. Kira noticed. "You're very brave," Kira said one afternoon, when Lola curled beside Elspeth's chair instead of the hearth. Lola shrugged. "She needs watching." Kira did not smile, but something warm settled behind her eyes. The village changed too. People passed more often now, bundled against the cold, leaving tracks that crisscrossed the lane. Some noticed the cats. A child once waved. An old man nodded solemnly, as if acknowledging equals. Not all looks were kind. One afternoon, a stranger lingered near the gate, eyes sharp, assessing. "Strays," he muttered. "Shouldn't let them get comfortable." Kira's fur bristled. Lola pressed close to her side. Elspeth appeared then, as she so often did when things threatened to tip the wrong way. "They're not bothering anyone," she said calmly, "and they're staying." The man scoffed, but something in her gaze made him look away first. After he left, Elspeth knelt in the snow and rested her forehead briefly against Kira's. Kira froze, heart hammering. Then Elspeth pulled back, as though afraid she'd crossed a line. But Kira did not move away. That night snow fell again, soft, steady, endless. The wind moaned through the eaves. The cottage creaked and settled, an old thing alive with memory. Lola dreamed of fields without fences, of warmth that followed her wherever she went. Kira dreamed of a place she had once known, long before the cold, where a human voice had spoken her name with love. She woke with a start, breath uneven. Lola stirred immediately, pressing close. "I'm here," Lola murmured. Kira closed her eyes again, letting the moment pass. Somewhere deep beneath the snow, the earth waited. Winter still had pages left to turn. Choices still hovered, unspoken, like breath in the cold air. And though the cottage glowed with warmth and quiet promise, neither Lola nor Kira yet knew how fragile such havens could be, or how fiercely they would soon be tested, when the season decided it was time to ask for something in return. The asking came quietly. It did not announce itself with storms or strangers or raised voices. It arrived the way winter always did at its most dangerous, wrapped in stillness, disguised as peace. The morning it began, the world was hushed in a way that made even Kira uneasy. No wind, no birds. Snow lay untouched, smooth as porcelain, reflecting a pale sky that seemed too large, too empty. The cottage windows were rimmed with frost so thick they blurred the line between inside and out. Lola woke before dawn, heart thudding for no clear reason. She lifted her head, ears pricked. The clock ticked. The fire had burned low, embers glowing faintly. Kira slept curled tight, nose tucked beneath her tail, breath shallow but steady. Something felt off. Lola rose and padded toward the door, placing each paw carefully. She peered through the crack between wood and frame. The world beyond looked frozen in time. No tracks marked the snow, not even Elspeth's careful footprints from the night before. The apple tree stood rigid, branches etched sharply against the sky. The silence pressed close, heavy enough to feel. Lola shivered. Behind her, Kira stirred. "You feel it too," Kira said softly. Lola nodded. Elspeth did not rise at her usual hour. The kettle did not sing. The cottage stayed still. When Elspeth finally emerged from her bedroom, she moved more slowly than usual, one hand braced against the doorframe. Her face was pale, eyes shadowed. She smiled when she saw the cats, but it did not quite reach her eyes. "Good morning," she murmured, voice rough. Kira watched her closely, instincts sharp. Lola padded over without hesitation, rubbing against Elspeth's ankle. The woman laughed quietly and bent to scratch behind Lola's ears, briefly, as though her strength might fail her if she lingered. "I'm all right," she said, though no one had asked. The day passed in fragments. Elspeth sat more than she stood. She forgot the kettle once, then again. Her knitting slipped from her fingers and lay abandoned by the chair. When she went outside to fetch wood, she returned sooner than usual, breath shallow, leaning heavily on the door. Kira's unease hardened into something colder. "She's not well," Kira said that evening as they lay near the hearth. Lola tucked her paws beneath her chest. "Humans get like this sometimes." "Yes," Kira said, "and sometimes they don't come back from it." The words hung between them. That night, snow began to fall again. Not heavy, not dramatic, just enough to soften edges, to blur paths, to make distances feel longer than they were. The kind of snow that crept rather than rushed. Elspeth slept fitfully. She coughed in her dreams. Once she called a name neither cat recognized. Lola stayed awake, eyes fixed on the bedroom door. Kira rose silently and padded closer, sitting guard at the threshold. Morning came late and dim. Elspeth did not get up. Lola pressed her nose to the bedroom door and meowed softly. No answer. Kira pushed the door open with careful insistence. Elspeth lay still beneath the quilt, face flushed, breath shallow. The room smelled wrong, too warm, too sharp. Kira jumped onto the bed, paws sinking into the quilt, and leaned close. Elspeth stirred faintly. "Good girl," she whispered, voice barely there. Lola leapt up beside Kira, kneading the blanket, pressing her warmth close to the woman's side. Hours passed like that. The snow outside thickened, the light dimmed, the fire in the hearth burned low. Elspeth drifted in and out of sleep, murmuring, shivering, then overheating beneath the covers. Kira left only once, to knock over the water bowl deliberately, to draw attention, though there was no one to notice. Lola refused to move. She pressed herself against Elspeth's chest, purring with every ounce of strength she had, a steady vibration meant to anchor, to heal, to stay. As night fell, a single lantern flickered to life down the lane. Footsteps approached, hesitant, uncertain. A knock sounded at the door. Kira's head snapped up. Lola paused her purring just long enough to listen. The knock came again, firmer this time. Outside, the snow swallowed sound, but the light grew brighter through the window. Whatever winter was asking for now, it was no longer content to whisper. And beneath the quilt, as Elspeth's breath hitched and stuttered, Lola pressed closer and thought fiercely, desperately. Not tonight. Not yet. The knock came a third time, louder, edged with worry. Kira jumped down from the bed and padded into the hall, every sense sharpened. Lola stayed where she was, pressed against Elspeth's side, purred deep and relentless, like a small engine refusing to stall. Elspeth stirred again, a faint sound escaping her throat, but she did not wake. The knock turned into a call, muffled through the door, a voice carried carefully through the snow. "Elspeth, are you awake in there?" Kira recognized the cadence, if not the words. It was the neighbor from down the lane, the one with the slow walk and the pockets that smelled of oats and apples. He passed the cottage often, sometimes pausing to speak softly toward the windows as if the house itself were listening. Kira rose on her hind legs and scrabbled at the door. Once or twice. The latch rattled. The door opened a crack, letting cold rush in like a living thing. The man leaned in, lantern held high. His brows knit together when he saw Kira standing there, eyes bright and unblinking. "Well," he murmured, "that's not like her." He stepped inside, boots leaving wet prints on the floor, and called Elspeth's name again, louder now, threaded with concern. When there was no answer, he followed the sound of Lola's purring into the bedroom. "Oh," he breathed. The hours that followed blurred together. The man moved quickly but carefully, as though the air itself might shatter if handled roughly. He stoked the fire. He wrapped Elspeth in more blankets. He spoke to her, low and steady, calling her back whenever she drifted too far away. Someone else arrived, another human, this one brisk and sharp-smelling, carrying bags and urgency. Hands touched Elspeth then, more than Lola liked, but they were not cruel. They were purposeful. Kira stayed close, weaving around ankles, watching every motion. Lola refused to leave the bed until she was gently, but firmly, lifted and set aside. Her protest was small but fierce. "I'm helping," she insisted, tail lashing. The humans did not understand, but they did not lock her out either. The door stayed open. The warmth stayed near. By the time the fire burned bright again and the snow outside glowed faintly under a moon Lola could not see, Elspeth was breathing more evenly. Her face remained pale, but the sharpness had eased, replaced by exhaustion instead of danger. The brisk-smelling human packed up her things. "She'll need watching," she said to the man. "Fever's broken, but winter's not kind to lungs like hers." "I'll stay," he replied without hesitation. The man settled into the chair by the hearth, boots off, lantern dimmed. He wrapped his hands around a mug and sighed, a sound of resolve rather than weariness. Lola crept back onto the bed as soon as she could, curling against Elspeth's side again, purring resuming as though it had never stopped. Kira leapt up beside them, her body a warm curve against Lola's back. Elspeth's fingers twitched. Then faintly, they closed around a handful of Lola's fur. "Good girls," she whispered, voice hoarse but real. Lola felt the words settle into her bones. The night passed slowly. Snow fell, melted, fell again. The man dozed in the chair, waking at every sound. The fire crackled softly. Elspeth slept deeper now, her breaths less fragile. By morning the sky lightened reluctantly, gray bleeding into pale blue. The storm had spent itself. The world outside lay buried, quiet but no longer threatening. Elspeth woke fully just once. Her eyes focused, first on the ceiling, then on Lola, then on Kira. A smile ghosted across her lips, small, tired, genuine. "Well," she murmured, "you stayed." Lola pressed her head under Elspeth's chin in answer. Kira closed her eyes. The days that followed were gentler, though not easy. Elspeth moved carefully, bundled in shawls, coughing less but often enough to remind everyone how close the edge had been. The man came and went, bringing soup, bread, wood. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with quiet respect for the cottage and all it held. Lola and Kira adjusted without discussion. They took turns watching. They stayed closer to the house, venturing out only when the sun shone and the air softened. They slept inside more often now, first near the hearth, then sometimes on the rug by the bed. No one told them they belonged. No one had to. But winter, though retreating, was not finished asking its questions. And as the days lengthened by imperceptible degrees, and something new began to stir beneath the snow, something restless, uncertain, and not yet safe. Lola sometimes woke with that same tight feeling in her chest, the one that had warned her before. Change was coming. Not the kind that storms announced. The quieter kind. The kind that asked whether you were willing to risk warmth for love, shelter for permanence, and whether two stray cats who had learned to survive might be brave enough to choose something more. The snow began to recede in small, tentative ways, as though winter were testing the idea of leaving without fully committing to it. Icicles thinned and dropped one by one, shattering softly against the stones. Patches of earth emerged beneath the hedges, dark and damp, smelling of secrets long held. The air carried a different edge now, not warmth exactly, but the promise of it, faint as a memory you weren't sure was real. Lola noticed first. She had always been the one to notice changes. The shift in scent before rain, the tightening of air before danger, the way hunger crept up quietly instead of roaring. One afternoon, while perched on the windowsill inside the cottage, she caught a whiff of something unfamiliar drifting in through the crack. Green. She tilted her head, nostrils flaring. "Kira," she said softly. Kira lifted her head from where she lay near the hearth. "What is it?" "The world's waking up." Kira moved to the window, standing beside her. Outside, the snow still ruled the ground, but beneath it something stirred. A bird landed on the apple tree, small, brown, ordinary, and sang a brief, uncertain note, as if surprised by its own courage. Kira felt something twist inside her chest. Spring was dangerous. Spring meant movement, change, humans who came and went, doors opening and closing more often. The careful stillness of winter, harsh but predictable, gave way to a season that asked questions without waiting for answers. Elsbeth was stronger now. She walked farther each day, though she still leaned on her cane when the ground was slick. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her laughter came easier. Sometimes she opened the door wide and let sunlight flood the cottage until dust motes danced like living things. And sometimes, too often for Kira's liking, she spoke aloud to the empty room. "Soon," she said one morning, staring into her teacup. "Soon, I suppose." Lola did not like the sound of that word. Soon had teeth. The man from down the lane came less often now. The brisk-smelling human did not return at all. The village grew busier, boots on the road, voices carrying, the distant clatter of carts freed from snow. One afternoon, while Lola and Kira napped in a warm patch of sun by the door, Elspeth knelt beside them with a strange bundle in her hands. Two small bowls. Not the mismatched ones they already used, but new ones, blue-glazed, unchipped, clean in a way that felt ceremonial. "I thought," Elspeth said, hesitating, "you might like these inside permanently." Kira opened one eye. Lola sat up at once, tail flicking. "Inside permanently." Elspeth set the bowls down near the hearth and waited. She did not look at them, not directly. She pretended to fuss with the fire, though her hands trembled slightly. Lola approached first, sniffed, then looked back at Kira. Kira's heart thudded painfully. This was the question Winter had been leading them toward. If she stepped forward now, there would be no pretending later. No half in, half out. No easy escape if the world shifted again. Lola nudged the bowl experimentally. It did not move. "She's asking," Lola said quietly. "Yes," Kira replied, "and once answered, it can't be unanswered." Lola thought of the porch, the wind, the nights she'd nearly frozen. She thought of the hearth, the purring that had saved a human life, the warmth that did not vanish when she woke. "She already knows my answer," Lola said. Kira watched Elspeth's back, small and waiting. Slowly, deliberately, Kira stepped forward. She drank. Elspeth did not turn around, but a single tear slid down her cheek and disappeared into the worn wool of her sleeve. From that day on, the door stayed open longer. Too long. The first truly warm afternoon arrived suddenly, as though spring had grown impatient. Snow collapsed into slush. Water ran freely along the lane. The air buzzed with life. And with life came strangers. A pair of humans stopped by the gate, voices bright, curious. They bent low, peering toward the cottage, smiling when they spotted the cats sprawled in the sun. "Oh, look at them," one said. "Calicos are always friendly." Kira sat up at once. Elspeth stepped outside, greeting them politely. Words drifted over admiration, comments about the cats, questions asked too casually. "They yours?" someone asked. Elspeth hesitated. Lola felt it like a crack of ice beneath her paws. "Yes," Elspeth said finally. The word landed heavy. "Mine." Ownership was another kind of winter, sometimes safe, sometimes cruel, always binding. The visitors smiled, nodded, moved on. Elspeth exhaled shakily and knelt, burying her face briefly in Kira's fur. "Did I do right?" she whispered. Kira stayed very still. That night, Lola dreamed of open fields again. But this time, the dream tugged uncomfortably, as though the fields were calling her away from something she wasn't sure she could leave. She woke before dawn, heart racing. "Kira," she whispered. "I know," Kira replied, already awake. Outside, the first true thaw cracked the earth open, just enough for the future to breathe. And somewhere beyond the hedges, beyond the lane, beyond the cottage that had become their center, the world waited, wide, uncertain, and ready to test whether what they had found here was shelter, or a choice they would one day have to defend. Spring did not rush them. It lingered at the edges of the days, testing, retreating, returning again with slightly more confidence each time. The snow shrank into gray heaps beneath hedges and fences. Mud replaced ice. The lane grew soft underfoot, holding the impressions of boots, paws, and wheels alike. With the thaw came smells, too many too fast. Lola found herself overwhelmed by them at first. Damp earth, worms waking beneath the soil, the sharp green bite of new grass forcing its way upward, other cats passing through, their stories written plainly in scent along the hedgerow. She paced the porch restlessly, tail twitching. Kira watched her from the doorway, eyes narrowed with concern. "You're listening too hard," Kira said. "I can't help it," Lola replied. "Everything's talking at once." Kira understood. Spring spoke in questions. Winter had spoken only in commands. Elspeth noticed the change too. "You're restless," she murmured one afternoon, setting aside her book as Lola circled the room. "I suppose I would be as well." She opened the door wider than usual and stepped back, offering space instead of instruction. Lola froze at the threshold. Beyond it, the world shimmered, muddy, bright, alive. A breeze lifted her whiskers. Somewhere nearby, a bird scolded the sky with sharp insistence. She glanced back at Kira. Kira gave a slow blink. "Go, look." Lola stepped out. The ground was strange beneath her paws, soft, yielding, uncertain. She moved cautiously at first, then with growing confidence, exploring the garden's edges, sniffing every stone, every emerging leaf. She chased nothing. She hunted nothing. She simply was. When she returned, her fur smelled of earth and beginnings. Kira sniffed her thoroughly, as though memorizing this new version of her. "You came back," Kira said quietly. Lola tilted her head. "Of course I did." But even as she said it, she felt the question beneath the certainty. Would she always? The cottage changed with the season. Elspeth cleaned windows, letting sunlight pour in unhindered. She moved furniture slightly, making space. She brought home seedlings and placed them on the sill, talking to them as though they were old friends. She talked to the cats more too. "Perhaps I'll plant beans this year," she mused one evening. "Or maybe peas, they like the cool." Lola listened from her spot near the hearth, half dozing. "Do you think she's lonely?" Lola asked Kira. Kira considered this for a long time. "Yes," she said finally, "but she's learning how not to be afraid of it." That felt important. The first conflict came without drama. A cat appeared one morning at the edge of the garden, a lean tom, scarred and confident, tail held high. He surveyed the cottage, the porch, the bowls by the hearth visible through the open door. "This is occupied," his posture said, "but not defended." Kira rose instantly, fur bristling. Lola joined her side, heart racing. The tom stepped closer. Kira hissed, a low, controlled warning. The tom paused, assessed them, then flicked an ear dismissively. "Plenty of places," his retreating form seemed to say. "No need for trouble yet." Lola exhaled shakily. "It's starting," she whispered. "Yes," Kira agreed. "Territories wake up in spring too." That night, Lola had trouble sleeping. She lay near the window, watching moonlight pool on the floor, listening to distant sounds, voices, laughter, life spilling back into the village. Part of her thrilled at it, part of her recoiled. "Kira," she murmured, "I'm here. What if this doesn't last?" Kira did not answer immediately. Outside, a fox barked, a sharp, wild sound that echoed through the dark. "Nothing lasts forever," Kira said finally, "but some things last long enough to matter." Lola absorbed this, turning it over slowly. "And what if we have to choose?" Kira shifted closer, her warmth steady and familiar. "Then we choose together." Spring crept forward another step. Elspeth brought out a small basket one morning and set it by the door. Inside lay 2 collars, soft leather, worn smooth with age. No bells, no tags. "I found these tucked away," she said softly, as though afraid to break the moment. "They belonged to someone a long time ago. I thought maybe, if you didn't like them, that would be all right." Lola stared at them, pulse quickening. Kira did not move. Symbols had power. Winter had taught her that. Elspeth did not insist. She left the basket there and went about her day. Hours passed. Sunlight shifted. Finally, Kira approached the basket and sniffed the collars carefully. They smelled like dust and memory and something gentle. She picked one up in her mouth and carried it, not to Elspeth but to the hearth. She set it down and lay beside it. Lola's chest tightened. That night, rain fell for the first time since the thaw, soft, steady, washing winter away inch by inch. The sound lulled Lola toward sleep, but unease tugged at her thoughts. Beyond the rain, beyond the cottage walls, the world was opening wider every day. And though warmth surrounded her and safety lay within reach, Lola could not shake the feeling that spring was still gathering its questions. That soon, very soon, something would ask them whether staying was an act of courage or fear. The rain kept falling, and somewhere between the last snow and the first true green, the story continued to wait for its next turning. The rain softened the nights. It no longer struck the roof with winter's sharp insistence, but whispered instead, a patient, rhythmic sound that seeped into dreams. Lola found herself sleeping more deeply than she ever had, yet waking more often too, as though part of her remained on watch even in rest. Change, she was learning, did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived as a feeling you carried around in your chest, heavy but undefined. In the days that followed the rain, the garden behind the cottage transformed almost overnight. Tiny green blades pierced the soil. Buds swelled along the apple tree's branches, tight and secretive. Bees arrived, first one, then two, then many, moving with purpose. Lola found both fascinating and unnerving. She crouched low, eyes tracking their zigzag flight. "They won't hurt you," Elspeth said gently, kneeling nearby to press seeds into the earth. "They're working." Lola tilted her head. "So are we," Kira murmured from the porch. Kira had changed too, though she might not have admitted it. She still watched the lane, still marked the borders, still listened for trouble in the night. But there was a softness to her vigilance now, a willingness to rest her guard when the moment allowed. She spent more time inside during daylight hours, often curled near Elspeth's chair as the woman worked. Sometimes, without quite realizing it, Elspeth's hand would drift down to rest against Kira's back. Kira allowed it. Not always, not without limits, but more often than before. Lola noticed everything. One afternoon, as the air warmed enough for Elspeth to open all the windows, voices floated in from the lane, familiar ones, laughing. A group of villagers passed by, baskets on their arms, faces bright with the promise of the coming market. "Spring fair's next week," someone called out. Elspeth paused mid-step. "Oh," she said quietly, "already." She stood very still for a moment, staring out the window as though measuring the distance between now and then. Lola felt the tension ripple through the room. "What's a fair?" Lola asked. Kira's ears flicked. Crowds, noise, strangers. Lola's tail puffed. "Too many feet." "Yes," Kira agreed, "and too many eyes." That evening, Elspeth sat by the fire longer than usual, staring into the embers as though reading a language only she knew. She spoke aloud, haltingly, as if testing the sound of her own thoughts. "I used to go every year," she said. "Before. It's good for the village, good for remembering you belong to something larger." She glanced down at the cats, curled close together. "But belonging," she added softly, "is a complicated thing." Lola shifted, pressing her side more firmly against Kira's. The fair came closer with each passing day. More people walked the lane. Wagons rattled by carrying crates and fabric and laughter. The scent of baking bread drifted through open windows from houses that had been shuttered all winter. And with people came other animals. Dogs, mostly on leashes, off leashes, straining with excitement. Lola flattened herself against the cottage wall whenever they passed, heart racing. Kira positioned herself between Lola and the road every time, body taut and ready. One evening, as dusk settled in lavender shades, a dog broke free. It was young, all legs and enthusiasm, bounding down the lane with its tongue lolling and eyes wide. It spotted the cats instantly. Lola froze. Kira did not. She stepped forward, back arched, tail bristling, voice sharp as cracking ice. The dog skidded to a halt, startled more by Kira's certainty than her size. A human shouted from down the road, running. The moment passed quickly, but its echo did not. That night, Lola could not settle. She paced from window to door, then back again, agitation buzzing under her skin. "It's getting loud," she said, "and close." Kira watched her, eyes thoughtful. Yes, she said. Spring presses inward, it always does. And if it presses too hard? Lola asked. Kira did not answer right away. Elspeth noticed their restlessness and sat on the floor with them, back against the hearth, arms wrapped around her knees. I won't ever trap you here, she said quietly, as if responding to something unspoken. You know that, don't you? Lola studied her face, the lines etched by years and winters, the eyes that held both strength and fragility. She knows, Lola whispered to Kira. Yes, Kira replied, that may be the problem. Because freedom, once offered, asked something in return. As the night deepened, the moon rose full and bright, casting silver across the floor. Lola lay awake, watching its reflection move slowly across the wall. She imagined paths beyond the lane, fields beyond the village, other shelters, other dangers. She imagined staying. The choice no longer felt abstract. It felt close enough to touch. Outside, the apple tree creaked softly in the breeze, buds trembling on the verge of becoming something else entirely. Inside, the fire burned low, steady and patient. And somewhere between the pull of the wide, open world and the warmth of the life they were building, Lola closed her eyes and waited, knowing that the season had not yet finished shaping its question, and that when it did, neither she nor Kira would be able to ignore it. The night before the fair arrived wrapped in a strange stillness, as though the village itself were holding its breath. Lola sensed it long before the sounds began. She lay stretched on the rug near the hearth, eyes half-lidded, listening to the subtle shifts that never fooled her, the way footsteps carried farther, the way voices lingered in the air after fatting, the way anticipation hummed beneath everything like a hidden current. Kira did not sleep at all. She sat upright by the open window, tail curled neatly around her paws, ears swiveling at every distant noise. Moonlight traced the sharp lines of her profile, turning her into something carved from patience and resolve. You should rest, Lola murmured. I will later, Kira replied. You always say that. Yes. Lola rolled onto her side, watching her. You're afraid. Kira's whiskers twitched. I'm alert. That's fear with manners, Lola said gently. Kira huffed, but she did not deny it. Morning came with color. Not the pale, tentative hues of early spring days, but bright banners and painted signs and ribbons fluttering from posts along the lane. Music drifted in on the breeze, fiddles tuning, drums testing their voices. The air smelled of sugar and bread and crushed grass beneath many feet. Elspeth stood at the window, hands folded, watching it all arrive. So many, she murmured, it used to feel smaller. Lola perched beside her on the sill, tail flicking. It feels louder. Elspeth smiled faintly. Yes, that too. She glanced down at Lola, then toward Kira, who lingered in the doorway, poised as if deciding whether the outside world was worth the trouble. I won't go for long, Elspeth said, though no one had asked. Just to say hello, to remind them I'm still here. Still here? The word struck Lola unexpectedly hard. Kira's gaze softened just a fraction. When Elspeth stepped outside, she did not close the door. The sounds rushed in immediately, laughter, music, the murmur of dozens of voices layered together. Lola flinched, then steadied herself. She padded closer to the threshold, curiosity warring with unease. Kira positioned herself just behind Lola, close enough that their fur brushed. They watched. Villagers passed by, some pausing to wave at Elspeth, others calling out greetings. Children ran past in bursts of color, trailing ribbons and noise. Dogs strained at leashes, noses working furiously. The world felt very large again. Elspeth returned sooner than Lola expected. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright, but her shoulders sagged slightly as she stepped back inside and closed the door behind her, sealing the noise at a distance. "Well," she said, exhaling, "that was enough." She leaned against the door for a moment, then slid down to sit on the floor. Lola approached immediately, rubbing against her knee. Kira followed more slowly. Elspeth rested her hand against Kira's chest, feeling the steady beat beneath. "Thank you," she whispered, though it wasn't clear for what. The fair carried on through the day, its sounds ebbing and flowing like a tide. Sometimes the noise swelled until Lola's ears flattened and she retreated to the back room. Other times, it softened enough that she dared another look through the window. She saw wonders. A man on stilts towering above the crowd, bright fabrics snapping in the breeze, a woman spinning until her skirts became a living circle of color. And she saw dangers too. A boy throwing stones at a fence for no reason at all. A dog slipping its leash again, though this time it was caught quickly. A stranger staring too long at the cottage, eyes calculating. Kira saw everything Lola missed, and more. By late afternoon, tension hummed beneath her skin like a held note. When the music reached a fevered pitch and voices rose in raucous laughter, Kira finally moved. She pushed the door open with her shoulder and stepped onto the porch. Lola gasped, "Kira." Kira turned back, eyes steady. "I need to remind them." "Remind who?" "The world," Kira said simply. She stood tall on the porch, tail high, gaze sharp. When another cat skirted too close to the garden fence, Kira hissed, a clear, unmistakable warning. When a dog strained in their direction, Kira met its stare without flinching. "This place is claimed," her stance said. "Not abandoned, not empty." Elspeth watched from the doorway, heart pounding. Lola hovered just inside, torn between admiration and fear. Kira returned at last, stepping back over the threshold with deliberate calm. "That was reckless," Lola scolded, voice trembling. "That was necessary," Kira replied. Night fell slowly, reluctantly. The fair's lights glimmered in the distance, stars brought down to earth. Music softened into song, then into laughter, then into scattered voices drifting away. When the last wagon rolled down the lane and the final lantern dimmed, the village sighed. Elspeth bolted the door, not in fear but in finality. Inside, quiet returned, deeper for having been broken. They slept close together that night, closer than ever before. Lola dreamed of crowds dissolving into fields, of paths that forked and rejoined, of Kira always just ahead, glancing back to be sure she followed. Kira dreamed of standing watch at the edge of a boundary that shifted beneath her paws, never quite stable, always asking her to choose where to stand. And when morning came, soft and pale, carrying the scent of trampled grass and fatting music, both cats woke with the same understanding settling slowly, unmistakably into their bones. The fair was over. But its questions were not. And somewhere ahead, perhaps just beyond the next quiet day, something waited that would ask them, once and for all, whether home was a place you guarded, or a promise you kept, even when the world kept trying to pull you away. The morning after the fair felt thinner somehow, as though the village had exhaled too much of itself and not yet drawn breath again. Paper scraps clung to the hedges. A ribbon lay trampled in the mud near the lane, its once bright color dulled. The air smelled faintly of smoke and sweetness, and the ache of things finished. Lola stepped outside cautiously, paws sinking into ground that had been pressed and reshaped by too many feet. She sniffed every unfamiliar scent, cataloging what remained now that the crowd had gone. "It feels emptier," she said. "Yes," Kira replied, joining her, "but also louder like echoes." Elspeth spent the morning cleaning. She moved through the cottage with quiet purpose, gathering cups, folding blankets, sweeping up bits of straw and glittering thread tracked in from the fair. She hummed, not the cheerful hum of ordinary days, but a thoughtful one, as if she were sorting memories as much as mess. Lola followed her from room to room. Kira watched from the doorway, alert but calmer now that the village had settled back into itself. At midday, Elspeth paused by the window, broom resting against her shoulder. "I used to dread the quiet after," she said softly. "It felt like proof that nothing stayed." She glanced down at the cats. "Perhaps that's not always true." Lola felt something warm flicker in her chest. The next few days passed gently, but beneath the calm ran a subtle tension, like a stream hidden under ice. Strangers still appeared now and then, travelers lingering on their way out of the village, merchants packing wagons, children reluctant to let the excitement fade. And with them came glances, comments, questions asked too casually. Elspeth answered politely, always politely. "They live here," she said when asked. "Not they're mine, not I keep them. They live here." Kira approved of the distinction. Lola noticed the way Elspeth's eyes followed them when they ventured farther into the garden, or when Lola disappeared briefly beneath the hedgerow to chase a beetle or investigate a new scent. Not fear. Awareness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the cottage walls gold, Kira led Lola to the far edge of the property, near the old stone boundary half swallowed by moss. "Do you remember this place?" Kira asked. Lola sniffed the stones, then nodded. "You brought me here once, when I was new." "Yes," Kira said, "this is where I decide things." Lola sat beside her, tail wrapped neatly around her paws. "What are you deciding now?" Kira did not answer immediately. Beyond the stones, the land sloped gently away toward fields and woods that shimmered with new growth. The air smelled of sap and water and promise. Birds called back and forth, stitching the sky together with sound. "This is the edge," Kira said at last, "not of the land, of us." Lola's ears flicked. "I don't want edges." "No," Kira agreed, "but we live with them anyway." They stood there for a long time, letting the light fade. That night Lola dreamed again, but this time the dream was quieter. She dreamed of walking the lane alone, then turning back and finding the cottage dark. She dreamed of returning to the porch and finding Kira waiting, patient as ever. She dreamed of Elspeth opening the door and smiling, not surprised, not afraid, just glad. She woke before dawn, heart pounding. Kira lay beside her, eyes open. "You dreamed," Kira said. "Yes," Lola whispered. "It felt like leaving." Kira pressed her forehead gently to Lola's. "Dreams are practice," she said, "not decisions." The days grew longer. Elspeth began planting in earnest now, beans, peas, herbs tucked carefully into dark soil. Lola supervised closely, batting at trowels and inspecting seeds. Kira kept watch, scanning the horizon for trouble. Life settled into something almost peaceful. Almost. One afternoon, a cart stopped by the gate. A woman climbed down, well-dressed, her shoes too clean for village roads. She smiled brightly when Elspeth emerged. "I was told you might know," the woman said, voice carrying easily. "About the cats." Kira stiffened instantly. Lola slipped closer to Elspeth's leg. Elspeth's posture changed, not defensive, not yielding, but very still. "What about them?" she asked. The woman gestured lightly. "I've been looking for companions for my home in the south. Warm, safe, plenty of space. And when I heard about 2 strays taken in here, well, it seemed fate." The word landed like a stone. Elspeth did not respond right away. Lola's heart hammered so loudly, she was sure everyone could hear it. Kira stepped forward, placing herself squarely between Lola and the stranger, eyes locked, unblinking. "This," her stance said, "is not an empty place." Elspeth drew a slow breath. "They're not for taking," she said finally, quietly but firmly. The woman blinked, surprised. "Oh, I didn't mean, of course not without." "They choose," Elspeth continued, "and so do I." The woman's smile thinned, but she nodded politely. "Of course, I only thought I'd ask." The cart rolled away, wheels crunching softly over gravel. Silence followed. Elspeth knelt, hands resting on her thighs, breath unsteady. "I hope I did right," she murmured. Kira held her ground until the cart disappeared from sight. Lola pressed close to Elspeth's side, purring despite the tremor running through her. That night sleep came slowly. The world beyond the cottage felt closer now, not threatening exactly, but attentive, as though it had noticed them and was deciding what to ask next. Spring was no longer tentative. It was here. And with it came the understanding that what they had built, this fragile, quiet thing called home, had begun to matter enough that others might try to reshape it. Lola lay awake long after the fire burned low, watching the shadows shift. Change was still coming. Not tomorrow. Not yet. But soon enough that she could feel its breath on her whiskers, waiting for the moment when staying, leaving, or standing firm would no longer be a question asked in dreams, but one demanded by the waking world. After the cart disappeared down the lane, the cottage seemed to draw inward on itself, as though pulling its walls a little closer, holding what mattered tight. Elspeth stayed kneeling for a long while, one hand resting flat on the earth, the other lightly touching Lola's back. Her breath slowed gradually, each inhale steadier than the last. The tension did not vanish, but it settled, no longer sharp, now something heavier, thoughtful. Kira remained at the gate, ears angled forward, listening long after there was nothing left to hear. "She meant well," Lola said softly. "Yes," Kira replied, "that's what makes it dangerous." They went inside together. That evening, Elspeth lit a candle, though the light outside still lingered. Its flame flickered gently, reflected in the window like a second, smaller sun. She prepared supper slowly, deliberately, as though each motion grounded her. Lola sat nearby, watching every movement. Kira positioned herself where she could see both the door and the window, a habit she had not yet unlearned. Elspeth spoke as she worked, not to fill silence but to share it. "I forget sometimes," she said, slicing bread, "that other people see possibilities where I see responsibilities." She paused, fingers resting on the knife's handle. "I don't want anyone else deciding your story." Lola's tail tip flicked. Kira's shoulders eased a fraction. The night deepened without incident, but sleep did not come easily to any of them. Lola dreamed of hands reaching, not grabbing, not cruel, just taking, as though that alone were reason enough. She dreamed of doors opening into places that smelled unfamiliar, of Kira's voice calling her name from somewhere she could not see. She woke tangled in the blanket, heart racing. Kira was already awake. "I hate when humans look at us like answers," Lola whispered. Kira's eyes gleamed faintly in the low light. "We are not answers," she said. "We are questions." Morning arrived on a breeze scented with blossom. The apple tree had changed overnight. Tiny white flowers dotted its branches, fragile and bold all at once. Bees moved lazily among them, humming like a distant memory. Lola sat beneath the tree, gazing up in wonder. "How can something so small decide to exist like that?" she asked. Kira settled beside her, "Because it must." Elspeth joined them later, carrying a mug of tea. She stopped short when she saw the blossoms, a hand lifting instinctively to her chest. "Oh," she breathed, "already." She stood there quietly, eyes shining, as though witnessing something she had not quite dared to hope for. Spring accelerated after that. Days filled with birdsong. Evenings stretched long and golden. The village shed its winter skin and revealed its restlessness beneath. Doors opened more often. Voices lingered later into the night. With openness came vulnerability. Lola ventured farther now, sometimes to the stone boundary, sometimes beyond it, her paws learning new paths. She always returned, but not always quickly. Each time she slipped out of sight, Kira's muscles tensed. "You trust me," Lola said one afternoon, returning with burrs tangled in her fur and excitement bright in her eyes. "Yes," Kira replied, "but trust does not erase worry." Lola considered that. "Does love?" Kira was quiet for a long time. "No," she said at last, "it gives it somewhere to live." Elspeth noticed Kira's vigilance and tried, gently, to ease it. She moved more slowly. She closed the gate behind her. She spoke aloud before stepping into the garden, as if announcing herself to the world. "I see you," she said once, meeting Kira's gaze. "You don't have to carry this alone." Kira did not know how to put down a burden she had carried for so long. She barely felt its weight anymore. But she let Elspeth try. The next test came not with strangers, but with familiarity. A boy from the village, no longer a child, not yet grown, began passing the cottage every afternoon. He lingered, watched. Sometimes he crouched near the gate, clicking his tongue softly. Lola was curious. Kira was not. "He wants something," Kira said. Lola tilted her head. "Maybe he just likes us." "Liking is also wanting," Kira replied. One day, the boy brought a piece of meat wrapped in cloth. He set it down just inside the gate and stepped back, smiling. "For you," he said. Lola's stomach clenched painfully. Kira hissed. Elspeth appeared almost instantly, placing herself between the boy and the gate. "Please don't," she said firmly. "They're fed and they're not toys." The boy flushed, muttered an apology and left. The meat remained where it lay, uneaten. Lola stared at it long after it was gone. "He didn't mean harm," she said later, uncertain. "No," Kira agreed, "but he meant possession." That word echoed in Lola's thoughts. Possession. Belonging. Choice. They were not the same thing, but the lines between them blurred easily. That night the wind shifted. It carried scents from far away, fields beyond the village, other cottages, other lives unfolding. Lola stood at the open door, whiskers trembling, heart pulled in two directions at once. Behind her, Elspeth stirred the fire. Kira lay nearby, watching her, anchoring her. The world outside was wide. The world inside was warm. And somewhere between the pull of what could be and the comfort of what was, Lola understood with quiet certainty that the season was nearing its true turning. Not the gentle thaw of spring, but the moment when staying would require as much courage as leaving ever had. She stepped back inside. For now, but the air itself seemed to whisper that for now was not forever, and that when the next question came, it would not arrive softly at all. The question arrived at last on a day so ordinary, it nearly went unnoticed. No storms, no strangers, no raised voices or slammed doors. Just sunlight, clean and warm, spilling across the kitchen floor. Lola lay stretched on her side near the threshold, one paw hooked loosely over Kira's tail. Outside, the garden hummed with life. The apple tree had fully bloomed now, petals drifting down like soft snow that did not burn. Bees moved with quiet diligence. Somewhere beyond the hedges, the village went about its business, distant but no longer threatening. Elspeth sat at the table, with a letter unfolded before her. She had been reading it slowly, lips moving soundlessly, brow furrowed. When she finished, she did not immediately set it down. She simply held it there, fingers resting lightly on the paper as though it might fly away if released. Kira noticed first. Elspeth's scent had changed, not fear, not sadness, but something heavier. Decision. "What is it?" Lola asked softly. Kira rose and padded closer, placing herself beside Elspeth's chair. Elspeth looked down at them, eyes bright, unguarded. "I've been asked to go away for a while," she said quietly. "Just for the summer, my sister's place, by the sea." Lola's heart skipped painfully. "The sea," she echoed. Elspeth smiled faintly. "Yes, fresh air, company. They worry, you see. They think I shouldn't be alone anymore." She folded the letter carefully and set it aside. "I told them I would think about it." Silence filled the room. Lola felt the old instinct flare, run. Change meant danger. Leaving meant loss. Loss meant the cold, the hunger, the endless nights where survival was the only promise. Kira, however, felt something different. She felt the shape of a crossroads. "You wouldn't leave us," Lola said, needing to hear it aloud. Elspeth knelt slowly, joints protesting, and placed her hands flat on the floor in front of them. "I wouldn't decide without you," she said, "and I wouldn't take you anywhere you didn't choose to go." Kira searched her face. "Humans don't usually say that," Kira murmured. "No," Elspeth agreed, "but I've learned some things." The day passed gently but uneasily. Elspeth moved through the cottage, touching things as though memorizing them. The worn edge of the table, the chipped mug, the place by the hearth where Lola liked to sleep. Lola followed her everywhere, anxious, restless. Kira did not. Kira went to the stone boundary alone. She stood there as the sun lowered, watching the fields shimmer. She remembered other edges, ones she had crossed because she had to, not because she chose to. She remembered winters without names, nights where warmth was borrowed and never promised. She thought of Lola, how small she had been beneath the porch, how fiercely she had chosen life on a night that tried to take it. She thought of Elspeth, how gently she had held space instead of claiming it, how she had stood firm when others tried to decide for them. By the time Kira returned, the light had softened into gold. Elspeth was sitting on the floor. Lola lay pressed against her side, purring so hard her whole body vibrated. Kira joined them and sat. "We need to talk," Kira said. Elspeth nodded, as though she had been waiting. "We can leave," Kira continued. "We know how." Lola flinched but did not interrupt. "But leaving has always meant losing something," Kira said. "This would mean choosing." Elspeth swallowed. "I would never trap you," she said again. "If you stay, it must be because you want to. If you go, I will still be grateful for every day you gave me." Lola looked up at Kira, eyes shining. "I don't want the cold again," Lola whispered, "but I don't want a cage either." Kira leaned down, and pressed her forehead to Lola's. "This isn't a cage," she said softly. "It's a door." Elsbeth's breath hitched. Outside, a breeze lifted, carrying the scent of blossoms and distant salt, imagined perhaps, but close enough to feel. Kira stood. She walked to the door. She paused there, the world wide and open beyond it. Then she turned back. She crossed the room, stepped onto the rug and sat squarely, deliberately beside the hearth. Lola gasped. Elsbeth covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Kira looked up at her, steady and calm. "We stay," she said, "because we choose to." Lola sprang forward, wrapping herself around Kira, purring and crying all at once. Elspeth knelt and gathered them both into her arms, not gripping, not owning, just holding. The summer letter went unanswered. Life unfolded. The garden grew wild and generous. The apple tree bore fruit. The cottage filled with laughter, not loud but real. Lola learned the joy of returning from far wanderings to a place that waited. Kira learned that vigilance did not have to mean loneliness. And Elspeth learned that home was not something you kept. It was something you were allowed to be part of. On the first cool night of autumn, long after the fear of winter had faded into memory, Lola and Kira lay together on the porch, watching stars appear one by one. "We could have gone," Lola said quietly. "Yes," Kira replied. "Do you regret it?" Kira watched the light in the windows behind them, warm and steady. "No," she said, "because this wasn't survival." Lola smiled, curling closer. "It was love," she said. And the cottage, leaning slightly as ever, held their answer in its walls, patient, imperfect, and enduring. As the seasons continued their turning, no longer something to fear, but something to share.